Okay. Let's start to talk about frictional force. These examples, we ignore the friction by assuming the surface is frictionless. Okay. Now, generally speaking, the frictional force or the friction refers to the resistance to the motion that occurs whenever two objects are in contact. So there are two important pieces of information. First, friction is always some resistance. So that tells us the direction of the frictional force. It's opposite to the motion. And second, the frictional force occur when you have contact. Okay. So the frictional force, so that means where you are going to try to find the frictional force. In this case, you are trying to look at the contact surface. So there may be a frictional force. Okay, if it's not frictionless surface. Without contact, you don't have any kind of frictional force. And the frictional force can be put into several categories. First, the static frictional force. Okay. Second is the sliding frictional force. And third one is rolling frictional force. And last one is friction in the fluid. Okay. Let's talk about it backwards. Friction in the fluids, the most familiar example is air resistance. Okay. This kind of frictional force is quite different with other frictional force. So we're going to make a separate lecture to talk about air resistance. And rolling frictional force, it will not be interested in this class because it's quite difficult to calculate the rolling friction. But what we should know is that the rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. Okay, so that's why we want to. Okay, that's why people invented the wheels. Okay, the rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. So that's why we invented wheel. And sliding friction and static friction. Sliding friction is the most familiar one. Okay, we all know when you're moving something on the frictional surface, you are going to feel the frictional force. And the static friction is similar to that, but it happens in a static situation. So if you try to push the object, okay, it may not move if I use a very small force. But I did exert some small force to it. Why it's not moving? Because there is some static friction, no force. Try to compensate my external pushing force. So it's not moving. Only if I give it a large enough force, I can overcome the frictional force. I will make it move. Okay. So before it moving, it's a static frictional force try to compensate my pushing. After it start to move, it's the sliding frictional force. Okay. Any question here? Another comment is that we know that frictional force only appear when you have contact. That's because the frictional force is actually due to the molecular interaction, okay, or the electric force between the molecules. So only if you make them in contact, they're close enough, the molecules from different objects, from this object and the surface, will feel each other and they have interaction between each other. So it produces the frictional force. Okay, so let's stop here. Next class we are going to talk about frictional force.